Hi everyone, I want to start with a little game that I'm sure you're all familiar with. All you have to do is put a hand up like this, and when I say something that applies to you, just put one of your fingers down. Is everybody ready? Put a finger down if you've ever held back from saying something because you were afraid of what others would view your opinion as. Put a finger down if you've ever disliked the way you looked in your clothes. Put a finger down if you've ever blamed yourself for something that was not your fault. Put a finger down if you've ever been ashamed that your body couldn't support your health. Put a finger down if you've ever criticized a quality about yourself that makes you who you are. Now, I want you all to look around the room and see that we've all done most of these things. We've all been taught to criticize and shrink ourselves to fit into society's norms and expectations. Now, this isn't your fault, but we need to recognize this. What I want to talk about today is that allyship starts with you. And what I mean by this is that we can't expect ourselves to show up for anyone else if we're not showing up for ourselves at all. It starts with you. Before a plane takes off, the flight attendants give their safety talk. And one of the things they tell you is that if the plane were to be in an emergency, the oxygen masks come down. And they tell you you have to put yours on first before you can help someone else put theirs on, no matter how much you want to help someone else. Now, this metaphor is a lot deeper than we realize. Those oxygen masks represent kindness, vulnerability, and honesty. We can't expect ourselves to be kind, vulnerable, and honest people if we aren't these things to ourselves first. And when I'm talking about putting that oxygen mask on, I'm talking about being an ally to others as well as yourselves. I remember there was this one time when I was a kid, I was with my family and my cousins, and we were at this clothing store. And one of my little brothers and one of my little cousins, keeping in mind both of them are cisgender boys, wanted to get these hoodies. So they go roaming around the store, and they ended up in the girls section. And they found these light pink hoodies with bright pink words on it. And I remember looking at them, and I said, "Those are too girly for you. Those are too girly for you." Where did I learn that clothing is gendered? Or that boys can't wear bright pink clothes from the girls section? And why was I placing this shame and judgment on my brother and cousin, two people who I love a lot? You see, that was just the thing. I cared about them a lot, and subconsciously, I was worried that other people were going to make fun of them for wearing these stereotypical girly clothes, that it came out from my mouth as shame and meanness. I remember having to stop myself and ask, where was this stemming from? It started with me. It was the fears I had about how people perceive me, about being made fun of myself for wearing certain things, for not wearing certain things, for being told I had to act and look and feel and be a certain way to be valued as a girl in our society. And it was this lack of self-acceptance and self-confidence that projected onto others through judgment. We all do this. It's human. It's part of wanting to fit in. Because we live in a patriarchy that is so reliant on a binary structure, we often crave fitting ourselves into where this type of society values us. But we're never going to become allies to ourselves and allies to others if we don't start by reframing this in our minds. We have to become aware of how these external pressures impact how we view ourselves and how we judge others because of it. It starts with you. Jaheim Herrera and Carl Joseph Walker Hoover are two 11-year-olds who were bullied by their peers for their sexual orientation and gender identity. And at 11 years old, committed suicide because of homophobia. Data from the CDC explains that LGBTQ youth are bullied at much higher rates than their straight peers. A national survey in 2022 found that fewer than 1 in 3 transgender and gender nonconforming individuals found their homes to be gender affirming. Homophobia is an immense issue, and it starts with us. We have the power to make a difference. We have to reflect and recognize how these external pressures impact how we view ourselves so we don't unconsciously judge others because of it. Allyship starts with us. I was 10 years old the first time I was sexually assaulted, and I never spoke about it for a long time because I was ashamed. I felt like it was my fault. I felt guilty. It was a secret I was supposed to keep because I didn't know any better, and I was never taught that it was wrong. In America, a person is sexually assaulted every 98 seconds. 1 in 2 women, 1 in 4 men, and 1 in 2 transgender and gender nonconforming individuals have experienced contact sexual violence at some point in their lifetime. Now, I want to acknowledge that many of you in this room have probably experienced some sort of interpersonal violence. I also want to remind us all that sexual assault can have numerous psychological, emotional, social, and physical health effects on a survivor's well-being. How then do we support each other? How can we show up for survivors if we are survivors ourselves too? It starts with you, with understanding your identity as a survivor, forgiving yourself, and learning that it wasn't your fault. Now, these are things that took me a long time to learn and are things I'm still working on. Back in high school, I tried really hard to be an ally to survivors, but this was before I was an ally to myself. I remember I did this training at a nonprofit called Voices Against Violence, and I did this training because I wanted to become a volunteer there. And in order to be the volunteer where I wanted to answer the emergency support lines, I had to take this workshop. I remember at this workshop, I was triggered by the content, and flashbacks of my assaults came flooding in. I couldn't do it. I never volunteered there. This is because I wasn't an ally to myself yet. I wanted so badly to show up for others and be there for other survivors, I forgot I had to show up for myself too. Allyship starts with you. Something that I've struggled with for as long as I can remember is my anxiety. As a little kid, I lacked the terminology to advocate for myself and put into words what the panic attacks I was experiencing were. I didn't know how to tell an adult that I thought I was dying. I didn't know how to explain that I would go to bed at night and pray to never feel this way, only to wake up and somehow feel worse. One of the worst phases of my anxiety overlapped when I got Lyme disease in 5th grade. The disease had progressed in my body for several months before I was able to recover, and this is because the first test came up as a false negative. Over these excruciating months, I lost control of my body. I physically could not support myself. There were days where I would have to hold the wall in my house in order to walk. I lost 10% of my weight and left school in an ambulance because my anxiety would make me pass out. Now, I'm fortunate that I was able to get medicine for this and recover, but anxiety is something that I struggle with every day. In the US, 40 million adults, almost 20% of the population, are affected by anxiety disorders. Nearly 50 million have autoimmune diseases, and nearly 61 million, or 1 in 4, are currently living with disabilities. Health challenges are all around us. Many, if not all of us in this room, are directly or indirectly impacted by health challenges. Whether you experience mental or physical health issues or have a friend, peer, colleague, or coworker that do, starting to become an ally to this community starts by recognizing how prevalent we are. Now, through having friends and family that have also struggled with mental health issues, I've learned that I can't accept them for their struggles if I don't start by accepting myself for mine. I've learned that I have to understand how these social norms impact how I view myself, that I have to forgive myself for the things that weren't my fault and embrace myself for my strengths of my mind and body. I want to acknowledge the amount of privilege that I have in this, that because I'm a white cisgender woman, that I have a lot of privilege in becoming an ally to these communities. I also want to acknowledge that the stories that I shared today are just some of the reasons that I'm committed to becoming a better ally. Now, if I could go back to the stories that I shared today, but as an ally, I would tell my brother and cousin they should get those pink hoodies. I would tell myself that it wasn't my fault, that mental health is a journey, and that I should never be ashamed for what my body can and cannot do. Now, when you guys leave here today, I'm not expecting that you'll become the perfect ally to yourself, that you'll suddenly start forgiving yourself for all the things that weren't your fault, that you'll suddenly start showing up for everyone else around you all the time. But what I really hope is that when you leave here today, the next time that you see those oxygen masks coming down, that you choose to put yours on first, because allyship starts with you. Thank you.